welcome to everybody here. Everybody is welcome. I hope you know that and feel that. Our topic today then is about bridges, building bridges. And sometimes I think of bridges over troubled waters. There's a song like that too. But welcome to the study of life and the nature of the laws of thought. The conception that we live in a spiritual universe, that God is in us, around us, and for us, and there is nothing against us. Science of mind is also a correlation of the laws of science, the opinions of philosophy, and the revelation of religion applied to human need and the aspirations of humankind. So this is a practical philosophy that allows you to put it into your daily life without any rituals, without any form of religious activity, because you are a spiritual being and every step you take is a spiritual step. It's an act of spirituality. Spirituality is natural goodness. God is not a person. God is a presence personified in us. So we think of God as living in us because we are personifications made in the image and likeness of God. But in reading today, I'm going to take you over to something Dr. Holmes had written about bridges. Dr. Holmes says, think of the world's oldest bridges. What makes them last through the test of time? A good foundation, the right materials, an engineer inspired to build something that will last for centuries. The same can be said for building lasting, heartfelt, and healthy relationships. Building bridges that last is the process of creating sustainability. Collaborative community partnerships. Building a bridge for a world that works for everyone. You'll find that in the Holmes Reader. It's in addition to the Science of Mind, but it's called Holmes Reader. So how does one find right material? An engineer inspired to build something that will last for centuries. How do you find that information? How do you find that material? You know, if you think about it, the same thing can be said about building lasting, heartfelt, and healthy relationships. How do you build a relationship that is heartfelt, that lasts for a long time, and it stays healthy? Building bridges that last is the process of creating sustainable, collaborative community partnerships. So when you think about building bridges, you don't think of concrete and steel and all those different things that they've used to build a material bridge. How would you build a bridge between you and someone else, between you and a community? How do you build a bridge that can last and it is healthy and happy and both of you? Because it takes more than one person to experience the bridge effect. Although you can walk over a bridge by yourself, but you know full well it has another end. It has a beginning and an end. It has a start point and an end point. The same can be said for building lasting, healthy relationships. Building bridges that last is the process of creating a sustainable partnership. Building bridges for a world that works for everyone. Non-physical material that is priceless and cannot be bought or traded, but can only be shared. There's one mental law in the universe. Where we use it, it becomes our law because we have individualized it. Remember that, that's a principle in the Science of Mind. There's one mental law in the universe, and where we use it, it becomes our law because we have individualized it in using it. Dr. Holmes also says In reality, there is no such thing as your subjective mind and my subjective mind. He says, if our subjective minds were isolated things of themselves, we would be so completely separated that it would be definitely difficult to have communication with each other. And that's why people sometimes have problems with communications, because they didn't build a good bridge to get the relationship into balance and on the same plate and on the same plane. Within each of us, he says, it's a creative field which we call subjectivity. Let me tell you what subjectivity is. Subjectivity is the activity of the universal subjective mind. The subjective mind of God is called the universal mind. When God is acting, it's out of the universal subjective mind, the movement of the one mind. That's what it is. It's not some mysterious thing up in the sky. It's invisible. You can only feel the effects and see what it's doing, but you can't see it doing what it's doing. Think about that. Building lasting bridges can only take place when two or more people, two or more individuals are using the universal subjectivity for the same intent. So if you want to have a really strong relationship, you need to build a bridge for that. You need to be able to say, where are we? Where do we stand on this? How do you feel about building it together? How do you feel about making it work more efficiently for both of us? That's building bridges. The next great bridge, according to Holmes on page 93, he said this: the next great bridge that psychology must cross is a recognition that what is called your subjective mind and my subjective mind is merely the place where universal subjectivity, that means universal action, the creative medium itself, reacts to our personal use of it. So I'll read that again. On page 93, paragraph 3, it says, the next great bridge that psychology must cross is a recognition that what is called your subjective mind and my subjective mind is merely the place where universal subjectivity, the creative medium itself, reacts to our personal use of it. God needs you to personalize itself into your life so that when you live, you could feel divine guidance taking place. So that when you act, you can tell that you're not making a mistake, because there's no mistakes in the divine mind. What appears to be a mistake unfolds itself and reveals its combination, its attachment, its belonging, its place in your life, all of that. Where universal subjectivity, the creative medium itself, reacts to our personal use of it, our conscious use of it. Conscious of it or not, we are always using it. The teachings of Science of Mind is to wake up everybody to the fact that we are all using the same one mind. It is infinite, so it doesn't matter how many millions of people use the mind at the same time, it's still working just as efficiently. That's why God is God, because no human being has ever been able to duplicate that kind of activity all at the same time. God is omnipresent. And that omnipresence means God is everywhere at the same time in the same amount. If your house, say, has a room that's 100 feet wide, God is at one end of that 100 feet and at the beginning of the other end of that 100 feet at the same time, in the same amount, exactly at the same moment. You think about that. That's why God is God. Within us, there's a creative field, he said, which we call subjective mind. You know that? If you didn't know that, I want you to think about it, because you do have it. You have a creative field which is your subjective mind. And around us, there is a field which we call universal subjectivity. So he's talking about your subjective mind, my subjective mind, being together, connected in that one mind. And out of that one mind, the universal, the God unconscious or subconscious activity takes place. One is universal, the other is individual. But in reality, they are one. There is one mental law in the universe, and where we use it, it becomes our law. So we individualize it when we use it. When we're not using it, it remains universal. And until you use the universal, you have not individualized it, so you have no personal experience of it and no personal results from it that you caused, you initiated a cause. Because we have individualized it, that's how we use it. So how are we using this great wonderfulness that we are made out of? How are we using these tools to build bridges with right material? And how are we becoming an engineer inspired to build something that will last for centuries? Can we build bridges that are non-physical over troubled waters, metaphorically speaking, over troubling times? It doesn't have to be liquid water. Troubling times, this is a figure of speech. Troubled waters, or confusion over a lack of clarity, what you need to do, where you need to go, how you need to do what you do. A lot of people are not clear about their life. And when you're not clear about your life, you have to either stand still and let the world pass by, or you have to make a lot of mistakes and take notes. So you wake up, when you make the mistake once, you only make it once. If you do it twice, it's no longer a mistake, it's deliberate. It's a lack of consciousness. It's ignorance rather than acting out of wisdom. I'm going to ask you a question that I considered myself when I asked the question, when I thought of asking you the questions. Have you been thinking what you can do to support humanity worldwide? Human beings who are now going through the effects of a super major pandemic. Have you thought of what you can do to support humanity? I thought about that question and the answer myself. So I came up with some thought about things that I would at least have an options to work with. Here they are. Virtual chats. In other words, set up a computer program to have virtual chats. People who just need to talk and chat with them about solutions, about ways of being, about helping themselves. So virtual chats, small gatherings of virtual chats, food banks, mobility squads. You know what a mobility squad is? Helping people to move around. In other words, providing some transportation, helping people where to find transportation, helping people to be able to move from one place to another if they need to. Prayer for peace, prayer for clarity and wisdom, parent assistant groups, reading groups, poetry parlors. Wouldn't it be nice to go to a poetry parlor and have poetry read to you? You know what poetry does? Good, nice poetry does? It makes your heart feel better. So it's healthy for the heart. creative cheer-up groups. I thought about that. So creative cheer-up groups. How do we get people to feel cheered up? What can you do to cheer people up? Those who are sad from losing a loved one because of the pandemic. That's an awful experience. But how do you cheer somebody up? How do you bring them back to the moment they're still alive and they've got to deal with their life and the life around them? So I call it creative cheer-up groups. High quality classical music that is good for keeping our hearts healthy. I thought about that too. So those were my thoughts when I asked myself the question, what would I do to help the planet, to help humanity through the awful experiences of today? And at the same time, what we do with it is what matters, not how much of it we bear, but how much of it we neutralize and are able to make use of instead of having it destroy us. That state within us, which we call the creative field, is subjective and connects directly with the universal creativeness. And that evolves into our answers. I will talk more about that just a little bit. You see, the creative field in the universe is a subjective field. That means that it is full of aliveness, but it waits to be ignited. It waits to have orders in direction. It's power. The state within us, which we call the creative field, is subjective and connects directly with the universal creativeness, and that becomes and evolves into our answers. In other words, it shows us what we want to do and how to do it. We are infinite beings on the subjective side and inseparably part of infinite possibility. That's you. I'm not making this up. That's the way it is. Every generation shall praise the prior generation in infinite ways because of our common infinite connection to the possible. We are called to build bridges out of right material, to be an engineer inspired to build something that will last for centuries. Well, that's what we are called to do. Are you willing to answer that call? That's going to be up to you. You and I are connected to the possible. Think about this. You are connected to the possible. The possible is the window to a dream's fulfillment. We are more inspired when we are used to create bridges like that of relationships that last into the forever. We become more inspired. Quality materials are available out of our spiritual substance, developed through divine wisdom, shared in spiritual education, meditation, contemplation, and classes. Contemplation and classes. So that's where we get our material to work with. That's where we get our information. That's where we get our learning. That's where we get our practice. That's how we get to be able to contribute something out of spiritual action to help and bless not ourselves only, but humanity. The heart's longing remains for unbreakable loving connection, built from the bridges of consciousness, grounded in the truth of who we are. We are all created in the likeness of that which made us. Without or within, the individualized point is connected to the universal, which has no limit. You're connected to something that has no limit in any possible direction. You cannot think of something that the infinite mind cannot produce for you without limits, because that is its nature. The nature of God is to continue, not to end. The nature of God is to expand, not to shrink. The nature of God is to be evermore, never less. And you know what? You have a spark of the nature of God in you. Why don't you let the spark fire up? In this context alone lies the possibility of an endless and an eternal expansion. Everyone is universal on the subjective side of life and individual only at the point of conscious perception. We use the power of the universal mind every time we think. Page 93 still. So how do we see ourselves as a bridge builder over troubled waters? I'm inviting you to think about that. How do you see yourself as a bridge builder over troubled waters? Energy workers will tell you that what's around you affects what's inside of you. Think about that. Troubled waters can take on innumerable forms. There's no one particular way in which waters are troubled. But you can activate the universal subjectivity to open a way to infinite potential and an infinite flow of good. You're able to do that. You're able to open the way for that. Want to learn about it? Come to one of the classes. Read more of the Science of Mind. Talk to me. I'm going to probably start. I don't know yet how to set it up. I'm working on it. I'd like to set up a chat room for people to just call in and have a chat. And I want that to be universal, not just for Science of Mind people, for everybody, because Science of Mind is a universal movement. I'd like to have a chat room just so people can come and chat. How would you feel if you knew that because you touched someone, their life was changed? Something life-giving showed up for them. How would you feel? Now, Dr. Holmes says, no greater good can come to you than to know that the power already within you is the power to live, the power to create, not only to create for yourself, but for others, the power to do good, the power to heal, the power to prosper. You are to realize that the power within you is a divine authority. It is a dispenser of the divine gift. It is a giver of life, of joy. It proclaims the kingdom of heaven, the harmony of the soul, the unity of all good. Dr. Holmes. I want to close by saying to you, the heart's longing, your heart's longing, remains for unbreakable, loving connections. And you cannot deny that. Built from the bridges of consciousness, grounded in the truth of who you are. We are all created in the likeness of that which made us. We are called to join together to build bridges, not only for ourselves, but for those who are not seeing it yet, for those who have not listened. They heard it, sounded like noise, but when they listen, it unfolds into wisdom. I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to do a little prayer right now. Close your eyes. In this moment, I know that the presence of God is here, that every life is a manifestation of itself. Every life comes out of that one life. There is no life without God. And there is no God without life. For God is life and shares itself with all life forms. It is this presence, this universal presence, and the universal activity, which is called universal subjectivity. That activity is moving all of us right now as our eyes are closed. And as we are contemplating on what has occurred to us during this time of sharing, something is working within you, something is working within me to bring forth a greater life for those around us, not only for ourselves, but for everyone else. That's the way we build this bridge of wonderful connection. I give thanks for each person here today and every home represented. And I know that as our minds are energized through this consideration, through this contemplation of sharing that we've had this morning, that there is a blessing waiting not only to be received, but to share, to multiply. I give thanks for everyone. I know that you are blessed beyond even your own understanding. There is peace, there is love, there is joy, and all are waiting to manifest itself and to blossom forward like the most beautiful rose. I declare that all of this is part of our divine nature. I give thanks. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your listening. Thanks for taking notes. Thanks for being present for this wonderful time of sharing. I know that all is well already. Say with me, and so it is. Amen.